Good day and welcome to The Offshoot. I'm your host, Lee Sean Nelson, and today I have a conversation with Mr. Shaka Berry. Shaka, can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, I'm a 48-year-old citizen, concerned citizen of the world. I would just say, like I said in my bio, I'm a committed progressive. I just want to see things move forward. So I blog a little bit, Angry Black Rant,
Okay.
and I'm a co-host of Persistent Giggles podcast, which is kind of a variety show. We talk about kind of everything.
Okay. So for you, what does progressive mean? Because we hear that word a lot these days. People on the left say that they're progressive, but I feel like there are degrees of progressiveness. So where are you on that?
I mean, yeah, I agree. Everything is relative, but I just think forward movement.
Okay.
Like as Black people, ever since we got here, we've been wanting progress is what we wanted and needed. So,
Okay.
And I mean that for all people, like whatever your intersection is of oppression, because we all have, it's different.
Yeah.
So I want everybody to win, as long as it is not in conflict with.
Okay, but how is that possible, particularly in this country? How can everyone win? We live in a country where there is white supremacy and where we know for a fact that there are a number of white folks, maybe not the majority, but the minority, who clearly want to reign supreme over everyone else in this country. So how can we all win in that kind of situation?
Oh, to be clear, I don't mean now. I need white supremacy to lose, but I think white supremacy, they make enemies not just of us, of a lot of people.
Okay.
I say the immigrant community, the LGBT community.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say everybody, what I mean all people that are oppressed. White
Okay.
people are not oppressed in this country, at least not because they're white.
Yeah.
Maybe because they're poor, but that's again a lot of their own fault.
But a lot of the white folks that are oppressed that you're referring to, a lot of them tend to side with the supremacists.
Yeah,
for their own interests.
I agree, but they don't know what's best for them. I don't mean like So when I say win, as in better health care, better health outcomes, those things like that. Not winning in that ideology.
Okay.
Because their ideology is killing themselves as well.
So can we have protections for Black Americans and Native Americans and still have this win-win, if you will, for all people?
That part I'm a little not sure on, because race is already a protected class. So theoretically, we're already protected under the classification of race. It's not enforced. I think that's something we probably want to fight for. But as far as a protected class, we're already under that as a race. Okay,
so I want to push back on that, because you said we're kind of already protected in some ways. Can you give me an example of where you think that we are protected? Because when I think about some of us just going to a department store and not getting service or being looked upon as someone who might steal something from that store, I don't feel protected when I walk into a store and have that experience.
I agree with that, but again, that's I think that's enforcement. I think when you look at like civil rights, like I think the '66 bill or protected class, so we become like race, religion. Those are like there's certain things in class where if you can prove it, you are protected. So, but I think the problem is enforcement. And how do you enforce going in the store, someone just treats you like, you're going to steal? I mean, it's kind of hard to get that granular in legislative wise.
Okay. But you describe yourself as a radical, right?
I would say so. And relative to what the norm is, I would say.
Well, from the middle, if you will. Okay. So if someone is in the middle politically, if someone's in the middle socially, if someone's in the middle culturally, okay, on all issues and so forth, if they're in the middle, are you to the far left of that? Are you a radical to the left of that?
Because I think if you're moderate in today's political scene, and you don't, because people want me dead. I know that for a fact. Yeah. And if you're moderate to that, that means you might want to maim me. I mean, so that's not good enough for me. So I'm to the left of that. I don't think that being a moderate in today's political cycle or spectrum is a good stance. You're to the right.
Okay. So this is where I'm having a little bit of trouble, because hearing the words progressive and radical, and when I think about something that W.E.B. Du Bois said many, many years ago, when he said, basically we can't expect protections from a country that was never built to protect us. Okay, and so I would think that if W.E.B. Du Bois was alive today, he will also be a radical to the far left. But I don't think that he would be too kind in terms of trying to save everyone at one time. But eventually, yes, trying to bring everyone together. But I think he would put the black community first above all else.
I think he would too, but I think he would be where, say, Fred Hampton was when he died. It's not about fighting for everybody. It's about everybody knowing, like you don't become an ally by fighting for my issues.
Yeah,
we become an ally by we have a joint mission.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
So, with the black community, what we need since we've got here, we've needed fair treatment, safe schools, safe neighborhoods. Those are all things that all people need.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
If you attack that issue, invariably you're helping everybody. So it's not about me taking up your issue and say, "Hey, I'm gonna watch for you." It's about saying, "Look, we all have a common enemy.
Yeah,
let's fight them. Let's fight this beast first, and then we can work out our differences later."
But isn't the concern of those on the right, particularly, let's say, that 30% of white Americans who have this false belief that we are to take something from them? So how do we combat that? How do I work to ensure that my 8-year-old niece has a good life in her teens and her 20s and 30s that are better than what I went through in my teens, 20s, and 30s?
You advocate for policies that will make her life easier, that would alleviate things. Like, particularly, you realize the time we're in now, where there's a movement of fascism. Like, fascism helps nobody. So I mean, particularly us. So we're going to be at the brunt of it if those plans go through. So we want to coalesce with people that want to fight that.
Yeah.
That's enemy number one, at least for us. I think that's what Fred Hampton talked about.
Okay.
Even Du Bois to a certain point. There's a far end reactionary, radically reactionary wing, and they have a lot of power and influence.
Okay, so in other words, now I don't want to put words into your mouth. So when I think about some of the things that you're saying in terms of not being in the middle today and need to be more to the left or radical, progressive, it's the place to be right now. So where does protesting fall into that? Because that has been the action plan for the last 60, 70 years is to protest. Does that still work to get the things that you're talking about to advocate for?
I mean, I think this is necessary. I think everybody has a role to play. I think we wouldn't, there would be no George Floyd Justice Policing Act bill being considered if it wasn't for Black Lives Matter. And they're doing what they're doing. People stopping traffic and doing,
But that bill is stuck in Congress because it hasn't passed yet.
I mean, it's stuck there, but again, if you look at it historically, there's never been a bill like that to question policing in America. We've never been in that place. I mean, even though they're trying to roll it back now, that rhetoric, there's never been a place where police were under the scope, particularly white men. So that's important. I mean, you got to move the needle. But I think also you got to take it offline as well. You got to organize. I think King was a great mobilizer, but he wasn't a great organizer. Yeah, we have organizations to sustain this, and I think that's more important than the protests.
So what do you say to those people then who say, you know what, I'm tired of protesting. I've been protesting for 20, 30, 40 years. I want some action now. I want to see something different. I'm sick of protesting. I'm ready to get out there and do what Nina Simone said many years ago. Nina Simone said something to the effect of, give me a gun. So what do you say to folks like that who say they're tired of protesting and they want action?
I would caution anyone ready to pick up a gun and realize that there's more guns against us, so we're not going to get it via the gun. But I understand. I mean, whatever your capability is. I mean, the protesters from yesteryear were all young people. Yeah. So you're going to always have younger people on the front line. But I think support, again, organizing and political action. Okay. I mean, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it anyway if you don't have representation to fight for these things.
Okay, now that's something that we definitely have to dig into because you see representation, but we both know that in a lot of states, particularly states that are headed by GOP governors, they are trying to take away that representation through gerrymandering. So how can we get that representation? How can we get that protections if that's what's going on in the state? And people don't, for the most part, don't think about local elections the way they think about national elections. So, I mean, how do you reconcile that?
I mean, political education, political action, and getting involved. You got. I mean, there's a reason why they trying to roll back the vote. So if you know that, if you're armed with the fact that knowing that these people through hell or high water want to stop you from voting, then you got to overwhelm the polls. I mean, that's the only way. I mean, that's the reason. That's how they got Donald Trump out. They overwhelm the polls. And if you're not committed to doing that, then keep praying, I guess.
Well, on that one, I'm going to quote Sophia from The Color Purple when she says, "You can bash Mr. in the hand, think about prayer later." And because prayer is an action, prayer is prayer. And I believe in prayer and what have you, but sometimes you have to go beyond prayer. So, again, there are many things that are happening to the Black community, the Native American community, that we don't know about, which is the purpose of this podcast, is to bring those things to the forefront so people really know what's going on in the Black community and with Native Americans, and other minority communities as well. But if we have this belief that Native Americans, they're the first people of this country, they're the indigenous people, and if you have the belief that Black Americans, particularly those who are descendants of enslaved people, built this country, do not those two communities deserve some kind of protections, no matter what happens in Congress or on a local level in state governments or what have you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We deserve to have our issues ameliorated. But I guess the question is how we did get there. I mean, it's a marathon, so we got to look at not where we are, but how long we've come from. I think sometimes we feel to realize we came a long, long way. Yeah. Like I would not want to deal with what my father dealt with.
But again, I not want to always quote someone else, and that word marathon, I'm not sure how that sits with me, and I want to push back on you with that, and want you to give me some more response to that, because when I hear the word marathon, I think of James Baldwin when he was interviewed. I want to say in the late 60s or early 70s, it was late in his life, and he told the interviewer, which was a white man, he asked the interviewer, "How long must we wait for your progress?" He basically says that my father had to wait, my mother had to wait, my uncles had to wait, my nieces and nephews are having to wait. He asked, "How long must I wait for your progress?" referring to the progress of men. So I think what he was asking is, as a community, Black Americans, we shouldn't have to wait on the progress of white America, but we should kind of demand the progress to be now in the present. So can you give me a little bit more information, a little bit more detail about this marathon, and because do you think we'll see some kind of changes within your lifetime?
I don't know. Well, I didn't think that I see a Black president. I mean, not that did great things for us, but I didn't think I ever see that. I'm 40 years old, so when I say that, I mean, if a white man was asking me that in a context of saying wait, then I would definitely agree with what Baldwin said wholeheartedly. But my purpose is saying a marathon is imagining what my father went through. Yeah, my father, for basically me saying no more than what I'm saying, he went to prison. He almost died in prison as a Black Panther, as a political prisoner.
Wow, that's something.
And that was I'm 48. He went through that when he was 24. So I don't live in that era. I mean, I appreciate. There's a lot of things that are still going on, like police brutality. Yeah. Just homelessness and just the urban blight that's still consistent, but it was much worse in the 60s and 70s. So you gotta acknowledge that we've come a long way. We've only been able to participate in this system maybe 70 years. Before that, I mean, I wouldn't even go past what my grandfather had dealt with. So I mean, when I say the marathon, we gotta realize sometimes we've come a long way. We've made progress. But sometimes we get dismayed and thinking that we in the same spot. We're not. We're making progress. So.
Okay, so we made progress, but the progress that we made has been superseded by the progress that white Americans have made.
I think the bigger problem is every point everywhere we've progressed, there's always been a backlash. I think that's a big thing because you actually look at the quality of white life, it's going down too. I'm not here to cape for white people, but if you look at Alabama, like if you look at the last census, the story of the census is whiteness is dying in America.
Yes, the lifespan is decreased for white Americans, particularly white women.
It's due to their own way with voter patterns. So I mean, so I'm saying that to say like, yeah, we're actually catching up. We're closing that gap, not because of anything they're doing, just because of our own resilience and the fact that we understand this system better than they do. We look at it a little more objectively than they do. They haven't reconciled what white supremacy does to white people.
Yeah,
and as we have. So that's what I mean by So I push back on them making progress. Yeah, some of them making progress, but if you looked at the percentage wise, we're making more gains than they are. So they're going backwards.
So you think that not just white Americans, but say other cultures as well, other ethnicities and races, that they could learn from Black America in terms of resilience and the progress that we've made over the last 400 years?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you look at all these movements, they learned, they borrowed from the civil rights movement. They borrowed from the Black struggle. I mean, we was the first radicals to really challenge this government. And we're coming to a point in human history where white people are starting to realize that, look, they niggas too. Some of them, So.
Yeah. So I want to go back to, again, what a big part of this podcast is about, which is examining and or advocating for making Black Americans and Native Americans a particular class of people. Now you're saying that you think that you believe that we already have some protections in place, okay? And I want to expound on that because I do want to entertain and learn about the various thoughts within the Black diaspora, because not everyone thinks the same way. And I do agree with you that we do have to come together, but we have to be able to bring our ideas together. But right now, the ideas are vast. So, so when it comes to, I guess, examining or protecting Black Americans, okay, you mentioned like there's some legal things already in place, like discrimination. So an organization cannot discriminate against an employee who's Black or any other ethnicity. But I was talking to someone the other day regarding, and I don't know much about football, about this coach, I guess somewhere down in Florida, who didn't get the job, but it went to the white guy instead. I'm not sure if you remember this particular case or not, but is that not an example of where the status quo that's in place, particularly the white man, versus giving the Black man an opportunity?
No, definitely. I mean, it's definitely, but what can you put in place? Like that's something that only the market can correct. Like those are, the NFL is a problem, and he's absolutely right in that he was done wrong. But that's, I'm ashamed to say, I still watch the NFL, but that's on par for the NFL. But they're a private club. These are 30 billionaires that have power, and they ultimately make that decision. So,
but that power they have, it comes basically in some ways on the backs of the majority of the players. All the players, Black and white and Latino, Asian, so it comes on the back of all the players. But the majority of those players are African American.
I agree. Now, but as you and me, what can we do? Like we're not in that fraternity, so that's how ultimately those players have to decide that look, we're being used, and what we're gonna do about it. And I don't begrudge them for not doing it because they have their own business affairs to take care of. So I'm not counting their pocket. So, but just looking at it objectively, there's not a bill in Congress you can do. It's not you can say, well, there's nothing you can really do.
Well, I think that's what I'm asking. I think I'm asking, should there be legislation in Congress to make changes, or what have you? I mean, I was just reading just this morning. I didn't read the entire article, but basically, and I did not know this, but this is pretty fascinating to me. But I didn't know that there was an all Native American professional football league in the early 1900s.
I didn't know about that either.
I didn't either. So I think that's astounding. I think that's fascinating that we had a professional football team and it was all Native Americans. I think that's a story that should be told.
I mean, yeah, I do as well. But the only like that and the Negro League, the Negro League, they made it so that they had to integrate baseball. I mean, so I think we're at a point now where these Black men, these brothers, have been in the league, 50, 60 years now. They have the acumen, they have the collective wealth.
Yeah.
And they're not organized to do that. I'm not, and again, I don't begrudge it for that. I don't know that I'll be leading that charge if I was part of that fraternity.
Okay.
But those are the only things that would change that. I don't think you can go to Congress and look for a bill and say the NFL has to hire X amount of Black coaches. That's just
Well, I agree.
overstepping.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay. So I understand that. So that's basically affirmative action, if you will, or some kind of quota system, if you will. And politically, that's not where we are as a country. But what do you say to the argument that some would say that white men in particular have benefited from affirmative action for the last 400 years, if you will?
they absolutely have. I mean, once they decided that the mother of the majority can be considered a minority, I mean, they weren't. I mean, they had daughters and wives get contracts. So it's not, I mean, it's always been a shell game. I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that we were included in that bill. That was the win. Because if you go back to the last civil rights legislation, the FDR or social programs, we were excluded. You know, FDR made a deal with the Democrats to exclude us from a lot of those programs. So that was a win. So it was the fact that we were getting something for the first time from this government. That was a real win. It wasn't enough, but it was never intended for just us.
But how do we still get to be on par with where our white counterparts are if we are going to have this marathon race, if you will, to get there? I mean, how long would that take? I mean, will it take another generation, 2 generations before we are up to par? Like, we're here in Washington, D.C., and according to the census of 2020, D.C. lost a good portion of black residents. They moved out of the city. Whereas in Baltimore, they saw an increase in black residents. So D.C. is not very big. D.C. is no longer considered a chocolate city. I like the fact that D.C. is more diverse, but it comes at the expense of increased prices of homes and the loss of a pretty strong culturally historic black community.
Yeah, I think, well, to answer your first question about how long we got to wait, I think once we become a majority, a closer majority, once we become a minority nation, I think things will get better. I think slowly but surely. If you look at, there's a whole reparations bill being considered that was instituted maybe in '89 the first time by John Congress. That was actually on the floor voted. So it's getting traction because there are enough people with filling those seats that are on that one board. So we need more like there's a big movement of black people to the South.
Yeah.
If we can occupy enough seats and change that, I get these white supremacists out of office, I think you'll see at least marginal change. Right now, there's a roadblock in there. There are committed facets in office, elected officials that want to see us go back to the 50s or even earlier times.
Yeah.
So
well, that goes back to what we were saying earlier about gerrymandering and how folks in Georgia and Texas and other places in the South, where they are redrawing the districts so that they can ensure their victories. Now, yes, Democrats are doing the same thing. You know, in northern states like in New York, they're redrawing the districts so that Democrats keep their seats in the House, if you will. But it's happening at alarming rates in the South, in places like Texas, in places like Florida, in places like Georgia.
I mean, you got to depend on the challenges. There are some successful challenges to gerrymandering, and two, when it's not overwhelming the vote. The one good thing about gentrification is there's a lot of movement. So these borders are not necessarily going to hold still. Like those gerrymandered districts, you have a lot of white people moving to the city, where so it's. I'm not gonna say it's going to iron itself out. It's not, but you have to overwhelm the polls. You have to, okay. And in some districts, in Florida, Georgia, we absolutely going to lose. I mean, like I think North Carolina, they got a 70% Democrat vote, but they still maintain the House and Senate because of how they drew the districts. So you're going to lose some, but you got to keep fighting. And the gerrymander only works for state legislators and the House. You can still control the Senate if you overwhelm them.
That is true, but how do you overwhelm them? How do you overwhelm the polls when we still have a great number of young black men in particular, or I can say black men in general, who don't vote at the same rates of black women?
You got to fight through the propaganda, because I notice a lot of brothers are moved by propaganda, even thinking that voting doesn't matter, or vote. Even I've heard some that said Trump did more for black people than any other president, or even Obama. So you got to fight through the propaganda. We're in a time, living in a period of peak propaganda, where people
misinformation.
They don't understand. I mean, and they don't know why you think from the thoughts they have. So you have to fight that. You have to overwhelm them with truth as well. It ain't gonna work for all people, but the more they expose to the truth, the more the better the chances are that they're gonna follow through.
I hope that you are right in all of that, and I'm just being in the middle in terms of not being one way or the other on the issue. Again, so my thing is to really to learn from people like you where we are as a culture in terms of the Black culture, and then also where we are as a country in regards to Black issues, and where can we go from there? Because we are a minority within this country. We're not even the largest minority in this country. I mean, Black Americans make up less than 30% of this country. But yet, if you turn on the television, particularly the local news, if you listen to the radio in most places, you're going to hear or see Black representation, whether it's good or bad. Local news stations, small stations, you know, I'm a journalist. You know, it was always, if it bleeds, it leads. And of course, it was usually Black, and it was usually crime. And when it comes to entertainment, we're everywhere. We're global. You know, hip hop culture has dominated the world. Okay, and we're seeing other kind of influences from Black culture around the world. So I don't know. I feel like you're teaching me a lot, and you're challenging me on my thinking in terms of, well, maybe we should be more patient, is what it sounds like.
I don't know if it's patience or just more like understanding that I think sometimes we lose sight of where we are on the board and how we can go. Like it's a marathon. Like I'm gonna keep saying it's a marathon. It's a long. We're never gonna fight in this fight. Mm-hmm. This is ongoing. Like it's not just racism and white supremacy. We're trying to fight. We're fighting patriarchy. We're trying to fight an old world that doesn't want to die. Yeah, that it has to die in order for this new world to flourish. The globe is falling apart. Yeah, I mean, so it's a whole lot of things at play. I forgot what I was going to say to the other point. I don't know.
Well, okay, so with that though, so if we see in this country a change to more of a class system, where we see some Black people move up in the class, and then we see a lot more folks from various backgrounds, white, Black, Asian, Latino, seen a different class. Is that better?
I always want to see Black progress, but not at the expense of other poor Black people. I think sometimes as Black people, we get ahead, feel like we made it, and we don't care about the lower classes. When in a time when people are really starved, people are really doing bad. A lot of us are doing good, but a lot of people are doing really bad.
Yeah, but even for those of us that are doing well, when we compare, and I hate to compare, but we compare where we are with our white counterparts, we are still behind. We don't, so if we look at housing, for example, let's look at housing in D.C. For many white folks that have bought homes in D.C., they're buying in areas where they're seeing an increase in their value at a greater rate than, say, in the neighborhoods in D.C. that are majority Black. Okay, but what we're also seeing is, like I said, gentrification, where those Black folks who've been in certain neighborhoods for many generations are now being pushed out. This very neighborhood right here that I'm in started out as Jewish in the 1920s. Then it became Black around the 1940s, and it was Black for many decades. And around the mid-2000s, say 2005 or whatever and so forth, when you started getting more white folks coming in, and then, of course, in recent years, more diversity from other ethnicities. So I'm the last person to move into this neighborhood, and that was more than 5 years ago. I'm the last Black person, I should say, to move into this neighborhood. There hasn't been a Black person to move in here in more than 5 years. And I'm grateful to have my other neighbors, white, Black, Latino, Asian. I think that's great for the neighborhood as a whole. But I still want diversity from everyone. And if I'm not seeing black folks come into this neighborhood, the older ones are going to die off, and I don't see new blood coming in.
I mean, that's a problem, but it's also the cycle of in and out of neighborhoods. White urban flight, white flight. I went through that with my parents in Brooklyn. When they first bought the house, bought it from some Jews. They moved out. The neighborhood became all black. It is still, and right now they're fighting to regentrify that community. I think my bigger issue is how do we get the people in those communities that are subjected to failed schools, failed community, old policing. How do we stop that? How do we start that carnage? Because that's what's feeding it. Because a lot of people that sold the house moved to the suburbs. Yeah, that's what we did. A lot of black people did. So maybe they may regret doing that, but it's still okay. It's still making it. And to your point about comparison, no. Comparatively speaking, no. Well, the neighborhoods we moved into we did not appreciate like the white neighborhoods. That is a problem. Not sure how to attack that. Other than integrating, but I don't know if people really want to integrate in those neighborhoods. I live in Virginia now, but I've always been more comfortable around black people than white people.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to continue this conversation, and I hope that you are going to come back and talk more about this issue, because I do want to learn more about a perspective where there isn't the full support of making African Americans or Native Americans a protected class of people, but bringing together a cohesive rainbow of
how does that look though? Like conceptually, how does it, when you say making them a protected class, like what does that mean?
Well, that's what I want to ask my guests: is is it something that is even possible, or what does that look like for them, or is it something that is already in place right now? But I will say this, and this kind of touches on what we said a little bit earlier. When I think about some protections, I think about particularly from whom. So I think it would be a good idea to be protected from that 30% of white America that wants to bring back white supremacy as it was 100 years ago or more. So we know what happened in Charleston with Mother Emanuel Church and Dylan Root. He basically said he wanted a race war. Now, yes, he's in prison, okay, but
he was deterred from happening again.
Yeah, he was basically escorted again. He was escorted to prison. There was no shootout. And this man was able to just eat and what have you and so forth and turn himself in without any harm to his body. So, yes, there are laws in place for someone like that, but I would love to see something to the effect of what is not written in stone, but something that kind of exists in the Jewish community, which I have great respect for. I don't think that anyone should deny the Holocaust. Millions of folks died. I also think that people shouldn't disparage the Jewish community either. And I do think it's a travesty when people get on media and they say these crazy things about the Jewish community. But there's a consequence when they do say something that is not correct. That consequence usually can mean that person is in their job or what have you. But we don't have that in regards to the black community. So someone can go out there and say the N-word all they want and so forth, but they're not going to have the same kind of consequence happen to them as if they had said something similar regarding the Jewish community. And that's what I mean by an example of protection. So it doesn't have to always be something in legislation or a bill that turns into law, but something that society understands as a whole, as a cohesive, as Americans.
No, in that respect, in the respect of a societal shift, yes, we do because I agree that we don't like using Whoopi as an example. Like that show, there's been plenty of anti-black things said on that show, and no one's been suspended because they're saying something anti-black. Yeah. Even Whoopi at times have been anti-black. So no, I agree with that. I definitely agree that society needs a shift, but I think that again starts with us as well. Yeah. There's a lot of black people that are anti-black that allow for things that that support white supremacy overtly and corporately. So as long as you have that, as long as you have white people that can point to a black person and say, well, he agrees with me or she agrees with me, you know, you can society shit like that. You don't have a whole lot of Jews that are anti-Jewish.
Yes.
Publicly.
That's correct. And
it's
on
their own
that,
code.
Yeah, you're right. And on that note, we'll leave it there. So thank you all for listening and watching The Offshoot. Again, I'm your host, Lee Sean Nelson. Please check out the website at www.theoffshoot.org or go to Twitter and follow us or on Facebook. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.